The Canvas project was created to educate the Mankato campus and community by developing an educational DVD and discussion panel with the intention of addressing gender-based violence. We interviewed individuals who were willing to share their stories of violence. Through the development of this educational DVD, women and other participants were empowered through sharing their lived experiences. The intent of this video is not only to educate on the prevalence of violence, but also to create a discussion on how to fight against this violence and what resources are available on our campus and in our community.
Mostly verbally and emotionally abusive, but he also a lot of times would go through and just if we did something he didn't like, he would just bust our things, or he would give us gifts for the sole purpose of taking them away, having something as leverage. So it went on for years and years. My mom and my stepdad were married for over 15 years. So even though my mom talked so many times about leaving him and about getting a divorce and just running away, we had people offering us places to go and places to stay, and offering us money even to help. My dad was willing to give my mom money to get us out of that situation, and it took actually my stepdad cheating on my mom for her to finally realize, okay, there's no way to make this work. But I think a lot of times in especially abusive families like that, the situation is that you don't want, for my mom anyway, it was that she didn't want her kids to not have a dad. She honestly believed that having any dad was better than having no dad. And looking now, or even at the time when I was old enough to really realize it was just that's such a stupid concept, Mom. But it's really hard for people to see themselves as, not perfect, or to see their lives not working out the way they had planned it to work out. And I think that's a lot of times the hardest part of getting out of an abusive situation.
It was, I actually, I always had said, well, if anybody ever lays a hand on me, I'm done. There's no second chances. I'm a strong female. There's none of that. And about a year after we broke up, I was listening to the radio while at work, and it was a domestic violence PSA on the radio. And it listed off some of the behaviors. One of them was, being controlling, making you feel bad about certain things, isolating you. And I'm not comfortable saying that, my ex was a bad person, because I don't think it was necessarily intentional, but we always just hung out with his friends because he wasn't comfortable with my friends. Well, then it ended up being just me and all of his friends, and I felt isolated and left out, and I didn't, get to participate. He was older than I was by a couple of years and more experienced, and so he'd say, well, here's how you should spend your money. And, I recognize, I took it as he's trying to help me. I'm going to learn from someone smarter than me. But at the same time, if it's my money, I should be able to spend it however I want to. He owed me money that I had lent him, and I asked for it back after we broke up. And he said, well, all my money you wasted when we were together. I don't owe you anything. And so now I'm kind of overly sensitive, letting anybody pay for anything. And I recognize that that's not a healthy extreme either. If somebody wants to buy me dinner, male or female friend of mine, I need to be okay with that. But I also recognize that, I want to be with somebody, and I need to be with somebody, and I've made those choices, with somebody who makes me want to be a better person but who doesn't make me feel like I have to be better, that I'm fine just the way I am, but motivates me to want to be the best version of myself.
People always know that violence exists in opposite sex relationships. It's something we've all heard about and seen on TV, and everyone's aware of that, but people aren't always aware that in same-sex relationships with two women that violence can still occur, because you often think of the male as the perpetrator, and when there's no male, then this isn't going to happen. But I guess I have learned that I still need to make a conscious effort, not that I ever worry about myself being violent, but to take a non-violent approach, and to assure my partner that I'm not going to hurt her, and that she can trust me. My partner grew up in a household that wasn't always assured that there was violence, and I fortunately didn't grow up in that sort of situation, so I didn't really understand it at first. And we would get in, say, a regular argument, and I would raise my voice or just come towards her to talk to her, and I could see her shutting down or protecting herself. And I guess I realized that you need to have a conversation open to talk about it, even though I have never hurt her. It's still something that she thinks of, and she always feels that could be a possibility. I think I know she trusts me, but still sometimes her mind is diverted to those situations when she was younger. So it's definitely having a open commentary about it, and also being aware of my body and the volume of my voice, and never wanting her or anyone else to wonder if I could snap and become violent. It's about always making sure that I guess I'm 100% control of myself, and everyone is aware of my intentions and my beliefs in 100% nonviolence in the relationship.
And then one day I was over at his house. His grandparents were downstairs, and he, we were just being playful like we normally would be. We just, didn't go all the way. And he started to get a little more pushy, and next thing you knew, because I wasn't screaming no, I didn't think it was rape, but started raping me. And I was definitely, I felt, dead. I was not moving. I felt outside of myself. Experiencing it. I didn't think that this was really happening, but I didn't have a word for it either.
The transition from home to college was very hard for me. It went from me being safe and knowing what I was doing every day, knowing everybody I was seeing, to not knowing anybody, not feeling safe, not feeling at home, and it was very, very hard, and I didn't feel comfortable. I was living in the dorms, and I didn't really know anybody, and it was very hard for me to go out and meet people, which isn't typical of me. And it was very hard for me to go out and meet people, and I didn't feel safe talking to men specifically. Then as the semester progressed, my freshman year, I was starting to feel even more and more uncomfortable, and I was starting to have flashbacks. You know, I would see somebody on campus that looked like him, and it wasn't him. He's nowhere near here. But I would get terrified, and I wouldn't know what to do. I would all of a sudden be back in his bed and doing the things that he told me to do to him. And I was walking to class. And I was struggling with severe depression, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and there were times when I didn't even know if where I was real, or if I was really in his bed and I was just imagining things to keep my mind off of what was happening. I had no idea what reality was.
July 23rd, 2011, I was sexually assaulted. I would call that violence. It wasn't by someone who I knew was an acquaintance, somebody I met that night who was a friend of a friend, and he got me completely drunk. And I thought at one point when I was making a safe decision going, finding a place to stay, a guest bed, and then he was there, and I said no probably about 40 times, and it just didn't.
And then we moved on from there, and then I didn't want to go home because I had been drinking, and that would be unsafe, so I stayed at his place with her, and I didn't want to sleep by myself because I had never stayed there before, and it was in his basement, and that was scary, so I originally was going to sleep in his room with her, because he had a really big bed. And so I was going to sleep on the opposite side of her. And at this point I was pretty well intoxicated, and I could kind of tell that he was trying to do stuff with her, and she wasn't really she wasn't open to it. I could tell she was kind of uncomfortable, and she was kind of just trying to nicely nudge him away, and throughout it, he was reaching over to touch me at the same time. And he ended up going to the bathroom, and then it was just me and him in her bed, and he ended up sexually assaulting me. And then she came back in the room, and I don't know if she knew what had happened. She seemed kind of uncomfortable, and then I ended up going and sleeping on the couch, and when I told her, because we hadn't talked in a week, and I said, why haven't we talked? Let's get together. And well, no, that's not what happened. I think I called her a few days after it had happened, and I told her what had happened and what I felt about it, and that he had taken advantage of me and all of this stuff. And she had said on the phone, I'll talk to him about it, and then we'll talk later or something. And it had been a week, and so I texted her and said, we should get together and talk about this. And the first thing she sent to me was, I don't want to get together with you because you hit on my boyfriend, and I don't want to talk to you. And so I'm sure I sent her some message about what do you mean I hit on your boyfriend? He took advantage of me, and the conversation basically kind of spiraled out of control, and eventually got to the point where she just said that I had been flirting with him and kind of instigating, and that he had told her that it had happened and that it was just a mistake or something like that.
In an art class, and this kid, he would always just harass and just say inappropriate things, but I would just be like you're weird, get away from me, you know. And it came to a point where one day I was trying to leave the class, and he grabs my hand and he's like, "You're not going anywhere." And I'm like, what the heck do I do? I'm like, I was just like, let me go now, like, you're freaking me out. And I just kept saying that until finally let me go. But then it got worse the next day, because then he came over. I don't even know how you do this, but I was just sitting there, and he just comes over and just grabs my boobs. Right? Where does this even come from? I don't know. So I'm sitting there like, okay, and I'm like looking at the girl near me, and she got one of the, like, we had cops on our campus, so like she called them over, and then they pointed me out, and they're like, oh, did this happen to you? And they're like, oh yeah, he did it to this girl. And they said because she was 16 or something like that, it wasn't as bad as it happening to me because I was younger. And what was the craziest thing ever, because I didn't know people at that school at the time, and I was just getting to know people, I was like brand new, is that there were so many people coming up to me being like, you're ruining his life. Like, because of what you did, because you reported that, he's gonna get in so much trouble. And like, people started calling me like really derogatory names, like you're a whore, like it's your fault, you're a slut. Like throughout the hallways, people would just yell at me.
I recently lost my aunt, and that was not her final cause of death. Excuse me if I get a little emotional, but the final cause of her death was complications from painkillers and antidepressant. It wasn't suicide or anything. But when they're doing autopsy on her, they found a bunch of bruises and cuts. So we had no idea that she was going through domestic violence until we saw everything. And in Korea, in a lot of the Asian cultures, there is like zero protection for cases like that. So we're still fighting for this because her ex, he's gonna get off the hook most likely, because they're trying to blame the victim, saying she's dead, but they're trying to say, well, she had emotional problems, she was suicidal, so he probably didn't do anything. But when I've seen the pictures of autopsy pictures, you can obviously tell it's not something where that happened by accident. And I was always very like passionate about domestic violence awareness and cases like that, but when it actually happened like that to me, it just really hit me hard that this is not just the story that's out there, that it could happen to anybody, because you don't sit there and you don't ever think it's gonna happen to someone that I know, because I had no idea. None of our family members just sat there, and we were all shocked that none of us knew she was getting beat the crap out of literally every day.
I think a lot of women, it's drilled into their head that if they go to the authorities because they got abused, they're going to get deported, and it's going to cause more trouble, and they're going to be the ones to get in trouble. So I know people whose husbands have abused them, physically abused them, or even just emotionally abused them, and they have chosen not to go to the authorities because the husband says, you're going to mess it up for our whole family, they're going to deport you, they're going to deport me, our kids aren't going to grow up the way that we want them to, and it's going to be your fault. So they kind of take that blame and put it all on the women who are being abused by saying, if you go to the authorities, it's your fault, and not mine for abusing you, but your fault for choosing to tell. So I think that's definitely a big fear of of Latina women. What they don't know is that there are a lot of resources out there, and that there are, laws that say that when it's a matter of safety and personal well-being, that immigration status won't be asked about. But it's a lack of education and a lack of resources that are being provided to the Latino community, where things just go wrong and they don't know enough about it. Another big thing that I think is important to realize is the language barrier that might be there. They just are, whether it's going to report it, having to bring somebody else to interpret for them is not ideal. Oftentimes the abuser might be the one who knows English, or the one who can communicate better in the family, and of course they're not going to come. So, even just knowing, oh well, they don't speak Spanish at the police station, or that drives them away from even showing up, or I don't know if there's anyone that will speak Spanish at the women's shelter. Like they just don't show up because of that. I think education is a big thing. The majority of Latino women in the United States, I would say, are not as well educated as, obviously other cultures here. So I think that there's a lack of resources that are available to them in their own language, or in the community where they feel comfortable, kind of thing. I think that it's important for people to seek out those communities where they feel comfortable, because when you ask somebody to go to a center full of American people, when you know that you don't speak English, or you don't speak English very well, where you might think that they're not going to understand you, I think that definitely pushes them away. And there are a ton of resources available for abused women, but they might not know about them. I think, putting more information out there as far as reporting does not mean deporting, for example. Like even just kind of things like that, because that's a fear of a lot of people. Like if I go to the police, it's like I'm turning myself in for being illegal, or for working in this country illegally, or whatever.
But one time we got into this really bad fight, and it was in the foyer of our house, and he choked me, I guess. I don't know how we got physical or what the argument was even about now. I can't even remember, but I just remember my shoes were all over. It was in the foyer of our house, and he put his his hand on my neck and pushed me against the wall and started choking me, and I couldn't breathe. I thought I didn't know if I was gonna die or not. I can't say I thought I was gonna die, but I couldn't breathe, and in that moment I was thinking I could die right here in this dark foyer of my own house with all my shoes at my feet, and I couldn't scream, no one would even know. But somehow I showed enough fear, I was scared enough or maybe I just started to turn blue, where he stopped choking me, and I fell to the ground and was coughing, and it was horrible, but the fight didn't end there. It escalated. I tried getting away. It was raining that night, so I ran outside barefooted. My hair was matted, like all snarled and just bad. My clothes were covered in mud because he held me down in the driveway a couple times. Forgot about that. But finally, I got out of his hands and got into his car and drove away. He chased me in my truck and started ramming the vehicle. So I pulled over, doing the opposite of what they always do in the movies, thinking I'm not going to speed up because then he's going to hit me and I'm going to roll and I'm going to die, and I don't want to die. So I pulled over. He pulled me out of the car by my hair. It just crazy violent. He wanted to control me, and me escaping was him not being able to control me. He wanted me back in the house, and he wanted me to just be scared or something. He wanted me to go to bed and be okay with everything. I don't know what he wanted.
Personally, I've never been like physically hit, but I've been affected by it because my grandma was in an abusive relationship for 26 years, and that led to her son committing suicide, and then my mom became addicted to drugs, which gave her a heart disease, and then one day her heart just stopped beating and she died, and I was only 1 at the time. So I've had like the aftermath of all of the abuse and hearing all of her stories and like seeing her grieve and like all the drama with like my grandma and grandpa. So like that's how it's affected me, but I've never personally been hit or anything.
Well, in my family, my dad was the abuser of me and my mother, not my little sister. And then I've also been hit while being here on campus by my ex, as well as being at a party. So.
I had experienced it through watching my mother in her multiple relationships throughout my childhood, and then my last stepdad had sexually abused me.
Mine wasn't as like severe. It was more like a relationship in high school where it was mostly verbal abuse and him wanting to gain control of me and turn me against people that I care about. It was mostly just like he would text me horrible things or say something like you don't deserve to live and try and put me down and make me feel bad about myself, and I could tell in moments where he was like trying to get me to believe that he was the only one that could be in my life. So that's my only experience with that.
And also in high school I was in a verbally abusive relationship and kind of physical. I mean, I got shoved into a wall to the point where I fell over. I was shoved so hard, and then he never did it again after that. But like that's still obviously that's not okay. And he would like, he would like have people grab your arm really hard and like dig into you. Like I had bruises from that, but he would never physically hit me. But that's still, it's not okay either.
It's important to tell someone if you have experienced physical, sexual, or any other form of interpersonal violence or bullying. Don't keep your feelings bottled up inside. Many people have been there and they have come forward and they're much stronger. They're a survivor. They're able to really feel like they're in charge of their life again, and many go on to help others as well. So we have the resources here, and I think it's just so important to talk to someone and also remember that, you know, you can do a lot of good by coming forward, because oftentimes these sort of behaviors are pattern behavior and they reoccur. So by your coming forward, you may be able to hold that person accountable and get some help for that person too, so that they stop engaging in these harmful behaviors.
And what I view this program as is an advocacy program. So in short, advocacy to me means empowerment, means presenting the resources that they have available and then encouraging them to, you know, in their own time, decide what actions they want to take. Let them know that I'll be there for them no matter what action, or if they don't want to take any action at all, I'll still be there to talk, to, you know, process, to have conversations about how they're doing in school. You know, I want to be as much of a support system as I can. Along the lines of support system, I also want to encourage as much connection to other people in the community on our campus as possible. So For some people, you know, like I said, the counseling center is a really great resource. The Committee Against Domestic Abuse, of course, has advocates, but they also have some support groups that they have recently started, and for some people that can be transformational. Again, not for everyone, but just to encourage that connection and that support in as many places as possible.
I think as long as we recognize that this is just ongoing, we're never going to achieve and then we'll be able to move on. We always have to work on this. And so the more we think about it as a component of our daily lives and something to bring into what we do every day to try to be more inclusive and to see violence in its various forms and to recognize that it's out there and do our best to just incorporate it, as hard as it is to think about and to face, to incorporate it, the better we're going to be, and just realizing that it's an ongoing process. It's not a momentary thing. It's not something that we'll ever be able to eradicate and then look back and think, oh, we've accomplished this goal, now we can move on to something else. It's going to be ongoing, and so I think that's a key perspective to have going forward.